Hi, Tuba. Can we just go to your first screen? And just a
Hi,
minute.
can you
Hi.
see my screen?
Yes, of course, we can see your screen, but let me just read out your bio to everyone.
Sure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to the International Conference of March 22 being organized by IMS NOIDA. Today we have our next speaker with us. Her name is Tuba Kizelkan. She's an English language teacher. Apart from a linguist, she's an NLP practitioner. She's a qualified mind mapping instructor as well. She's also a speed reading instructor, a student coach, and a multi-skilled ELT professional. She has been teaching at Hoka Ahmed University. She likes researching in many different academic fields such as astronomy, history, quantum physics, neuroscience, anthropology, cultures, and so on. Wow, my friends, the list is endless. She calls herself a lifelong learner who is passionate to know, learn, and share. She's interested in linguistics, languages, and she really enjoys creating mind maps on linguistics, education, and some other research topics. She was born in Turkey. Over to you, Tuba.
Thank you for so much for this lovely introduction. It's my honor for me to have a presentation here and welcome all attendants and audience. Okay, um, I will be talking about the digital era and innovation, and I will go details about digital natives and innovative learning as a means of innovative learning. I will be specifically talking about mind mapping, which is my specialization. Okay, so the content of my presentation includes the description of digital era and the post-COVID period in the digital era, the advantages and disadvantages, and I will be also talking about digital natives and the way they learn, and particularly mind mapping as a great tool for digital natives. And finally, I will show my references with contact information. So, what is a digital era? That is a period where the digital technologies play a prominent role in shaping up and regulating the behaviors, performances, and standards, etc., of societies, communities, organizations, and individuals. So, there are many explanations of digital era. According to Collins Dictionary, it says the digital era, the digital age or information age, is a time when large amounts of information are widely available to many people, largely through computer technology. And there are so many different definitions of the digital era, the digital age. And another definition is that from Techopedia, it defines the digital age, the digital era, as the advancement of technology from analog, electronic, and mechanical devices to the digital technology available today. And the era started during the 1980s and is still ongoing. And today we started to talk about the post digital era, actually. So the digital revolution also marks the beginning of information era. Most of the countries, individuals adopt new technology, which has been developing every day, and digital technologies are involved to some extent in most aspects of our lives. And there are some digital forces. Mainly social media and big data, mobility, and the pervasive computing and cloud and artificial intelligence and robotics. They have been constructing previous world order, we can say. And as a mind mapping instructor professional, I have just created many mind maps for this presentation. And here are the characteristics of digital era. So I have summarized it so that it can be clearly understood. So mainly I will be talking about the interactive, the innovative, the global, and the technological side of the digital era. And that the location is no longer an obstacle and all the traditional geographical barriers have been removed. And starting the mass collaboration, the digital era started a mass collaboration. For example, the massive open online course, abbreviated as MOOC, and e-learning platforms have rapidly developed, and the transferable skills and adaptable and flexible practices have been improved, and huge interaction has been developed. For example, co-developing ideas and co-solving problems and problem-solving skills have been developed by this collaboration, and the huge information exponentiality. For example, a hyper-connected world. We are living in a hyper-connected world, and there is a huge information flow with loads of integrity and consistency, and there is a huge competence in business life today. And of course, the very key word for digital era is internet. Also, um, a, a characteristic of the digital natives, they are very fond of internet actually. um, Many people just do their online shopping. They use internet for shopping even they don't go to shops anymore, and they use YouTube and they do lots of search, and they send email for interconnection, and they use internet for communication. There are so many people mostly prefer internet for communication for instead of a calling. And of course, today many people use internet for entertainment in many ways. And for sure, the digital era caused a revolution in education life. Notably, for example, the education turned into student-centered, and of course, in the lockdown times, the online learning started, and the digital textbooks have emerged, and research sharing has been introduced, and of course, not only students, but also there has been a change in teachers' role. The teachers now have become more mentor, facilitator, supervisor, and the term lifelong learning has emerged after this digital era. And of course, social media. So there are many ways, there are many instruments for social media. Actually, they have become a very important part of many people's lives. Even many people start their days through Instagram or Facebook and Snapchat, LinkedIn, a professional platform, and Pinterest, and Tumblr, Twitter, and Google plus so on. So, what are the advantages and disadvantages of digitalization? So, let me talk briefly about digitalization. It's the use of digital technology to transform to a company model in order to improve revenue and value added prospects. And it cooperates the process of adapting all business models to new technologies to embrace digital technology's potential to collect data, identify patterns, and make smarter business decisions. Yes, actually, it includes no working harder, but working smarter. I should say. And the purpose of digitalization is to describe the process to enabling and improving and transforming business operations through the use of digitalized data and technologies in order to transform how organizations conduct business to improve productivity. So this digital era brings all kinds of information to actually our fingertips thanks to the centralization and this accessibility of data. And The digitalization has also transformed our ability to communicate with numerous applications which allow us to send messages each other immediately and in many different formats. For example, mentioning someone's name on a social media post or doing a video call. So, what are the advantages and disadvantages? I have briefly mentioned in this mind map. The advantages can be summarized as and higher productivity and enhanced agility and also resilience and quality and consistency, and it contributes a better decision making thanks to uh, very quick, very rapid um, web interconnection, and it encourages innovation actually, both in terms of individuals and organizations. And of course, it causes less human error, and it improves the efficiency and productivity again in terms of individuals and organizations. And of course, it provides a very much easier communication and teamwork. So it prompts collaboration, we can say. And of course, everything has pros and the negative sides. So, what are the disadvantages? Actually, there are many disadvantages, but I've just summarized it. So, there's a work overload because of this digitalization. And of course, there is a manipulation in terms of digital media, and, and unfortunately, it causes addiction in all ages. And of course, it can fail the data security. It can cause the the hackers can appear, and it is a complex thing. So many everyone is exposed to a huge information flow. So it is a complex structure, and of course there are privacy issues, and there's of course a time disperse due to this digitalization. Okay. So what's post-COVID, the relation of post-COVID and period in the digital era? So what is the connection? Of course, there's a very important connection, which is the subject of this presentation and this event actually. So the COVID-19 has created notably shifts in paradigms and a dramatic increase in working from home and online shopping, online services and entertainment, and an enormous change in all areas of life, such as education. And multiple domains have been affected, such as financial consequences, security, and remote work, worker well-being, individual and organizational changes, and career attitudes. And we can add this list to many other things. And it is obvious that the coronavirus pandemic has accelerated digitalization and the adaptation of new technologies profoundly affect and the way we live and the way we work. The COVID 19 has resulted in schools shut all across the world, as we very well know it. There was already high growth in adaptation education technology even before COVID 19. And with the pandemic, the global educational technology, the edtech investments has increased exponentially, and a sudden shift from classrooms into remote learning environments provided saving time, quick accessibility, a promising environment for digital learners, for the digital natives. And on the other hand, according to some study, which I included in my reference, there are some disadvantages of digital learning, such as lowering non cognitive or socio emotional abilities of learners, as well as cognitive skills of parents, which is related to the learner's process, as not only parents possess the digital skills required to help their children deal with some technological problems. I'm sorry, have I interrupted the presentation? This chart, um, can you see it? Yeah. This chart shows how COVID-19 staggers impact on global education. And this is the number of learners impacted by national school closures worldwide. Okay. And this is a mind map I created about digital natives. So the very first thing about digital natives is they were born digital. They were born into a digital world, and they're grown up with technology, and they do almost everything through internet, and they rapidly do everything online, and they're very fond of games, the artificial worlds, and they have hypertext minds, not the ones that the not the digital natives, but um, the older generations have. So they have different kind of minds, and they like nonlinear information, which is a subject of mind map, which is a qualification of the mind mapping. So mind mapping is based on nonlinear information. That is why the digital natives love it quite very much, and they're quick and efficient for in everything. They don't have lots of patience, and they prefer working collaboratively, and they externalize a meaning, and they perceive things in a very different way from the older generation. So according to Prensky, the first generations to grow up with a new technology, and they have spent their entire lives surrounded by and using computers, the video games and the digital music players and cell phones, the video cams, and all other tools and toys of the digital ages. The computer games, email, the internet, cell phones, and instant messaging are integral parts of these natives, according to Prensky. So this is a picture of Tony Buzan, the creator, the father of mind map. So what is a mind map? Actually, it is a diagram for representing tasks, or words, concepts, or items, and it's linked to and arranged around a central concept or subject using a nonlinear graphical layout. And it turns a long list of monotonous linear information into a very colorful and memorable, enjoyable, and highly organized diagram, which includes the images and some notes, some personal notes, some links, and etc. And of course, as I said, it was created by Tony Buzan, who completed his undergraduate degree in psychology, English, mathematics, and science. And on the subject, Tony Buzan has written over 100 best-selling books translated into 150 languages and read by millions of people worldwide. So, um, I have a great experience teaching my students using mind maps. Actually, all of my students in many different ages, from the young learners to adults, and they most of them are the digital natives. They are digital learners, and they prefer learning through mind maps because they have a nonlinear approach to information, which is also a characteristic of the digital era. And they learn through catchy keywords and highlighted main points, and they prefer to learn in a fun and untraditional way. And they memorize better when they personalize information. And the mind maps involve whole brain process. We call it whole brain process, which means both left and right brain features. Uh, it just works with both brain functions, which is quite important in terms of learning. And they like brainstorming and creativity and also innovation. And of course, they are time savers because they only include the keywords, not the whole sentences, not many many linear notes, pages of notes. Okay, so these are my references. uh, I have done a lot of research for this presentation, and this is my email address and um, my Instagram account, and also I have a blog um, on WordPress. So I am glad and I appreciate any questions related to my presentation and subject I presented.
Friends, in case any one of you has any questions, please share. I don't think, Tuba, that we have any kind of questions yet. So perhaps, whenever we get some questions later on, we can always send them to you.
Yeah, sure. I would gladly answer the questions. So here is my email address. So if anyone just has any question about any subject that I presented, or the expert, my expertise, like speed reading and NLP or ELT or mind mapping, and I would gladly answer any questions through my email address, and they can contact me through my Instagram and WordPress. Also, I have a profile on LinkedIn with the name of Tuba Kizelkan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Tuba, for joining us. And it was a very informative session that was there. I really like the use of your word, the digital natives, and then the way you created those mind maps to understand, okay, this is what a digital person is of today. And these are the qualities, and this is the way they would like to learn. And especially like the fact that they have hypertext minds, they are non-linear minds, and they need something different. So, and especially the mind maps, when you share, they really help out because they help the right and the left brained teacher. So this was one of my major takeaways from your sharing. Thank you
Oh,
so much.
thank you too. Thank you.
All right,
You're
so we will be
welcome.
making you an attendee now, Tuba.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Friends, we are waiting for our next speaker to join us. There is some technical problem at his end, and so as soon as he joins, we will be back. Thank you so much for your patience. We will connect with you shortly. Thank you. Our next speaker today is Mr. Chijoke Nana Ibeku. He's a lawyer and a certified mediator in Nigeria. He's also a member of the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators. He's presently on 92.9 FM Capital FM, Abuja, wherein he hosts his program, The Mediators. He seeks to bring forth the urgent need for mediation practice to be imbibed by more and more Nigerians. Friends, we are soon going to connect with you with Mr. Chijoke. Please give us 2 minutes. Well, my friends, Mr. Chijoke Nana Ibeko is going to speak on the birth of COVIDnomics. He's just trying to connect to his presentation with us, and it will take some time. Please, thank you so much for your patience. Hello, Chijoke. How are you doing?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, of course. We can hear you now.
Wow, what a challenging time. The network has been very challenging.
Yes, there was a lot of technical glitch at your end and at our end as well.
Okay.
So before you just start,
So can I quickly run through what
could you please come again?
Can I now quickly run through what I have for today? Because the network is challenging. I understand I have only 20 minutes time.
Yes, of course. You can take your 20 minutes time, and I'll just give me a second before we start. Ricardo, are you here? And can you hear me? Please raise your hand. Yours would be the next session after Chijoke would finish his speaking. Please confirm and raise your hand. Thank you so much for your for bearing with us, for bearing with this technical glitch as well. Thank you so much, everyone. And friends, now we have with us our next speaker, Mr. Chijoke Nana Ibeku. His topic is birth of COVIDnomics. So let us hear from him. Birth of COVIDnomics, Chijoke Nana Ibeku. Thank you.
All right, thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a challenging network, but I think we can overcome that. I'd like to start immediately and make the best use of time before we run into another glitch. The birth of COVIDnomics basically is about economic effects of COVID. I'd like to relate this to an area.
Yes, I'm Umar Farooq Kabir, a chief magistrate and principal district court judge in Kaduna State, Nigeria. I have an over a decade. Yes, how about now? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yes, right now. Yes, we can hear you.
I am a human rights advocate and activist for my campaign on freezing systems in Nigeria.
Yes, of course. Now your voice is clear.
Oh?
Your voice is clear now.
Okay. It has to do with the network. It is the network.
Right.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me, Conal? Can you
I can
hear
hear you.
me?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Hello?
Hello, your voice fades at times.
Hello? How about now?
Better.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Right. So, and we will start in the
Thank
next
you very
5 minutes.
much. I think it has to do with my phone network connection. Yes, I was saying, yes, I'm Umar Farooq Kabir. I am a human rights activist and proactive campaigner for the rule of law and fight against corruption in Nigeria. I have for over a decade developed fashions and projects on alternative dispute resolution ADR and prison system reforms. This is what I do voluntarily. I was a member for many organizations, NGOs, for the promotion of rule of law and fight against corruption in Nigeria.
Hi, Conal. How are you doing? I cannot hear you. You're on the mute.
Hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can I introduce you now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon, friends. Friends, our next speaker is Mr. Conal Creeder. He is an award-winning novelist, playwright, documentary filmmaker, and collaborative artist. Over the past 30 years, his artistic practice has focused on a very defined locale, which he describes as a spaghetti ball of streets in the downtown Cork City of Ireland. This is where his family has lived and traded since the beginning of the last century. Conal's exploration of this tight-knit neighborhood finds voice across various media forms, yet, when examined in its entirety, his diverse output comes together as one great work. Closer to home, he invests his creativity in local projects, including his active engagement with the Scribes Initiative, an ongoing cross-border literary exchange between North and South of Ireland, aimed at copper fastening links between Cork City and the West Belfast capital. He has also been proactive with several committees, and his continued association with Lifelong Learning Festival has contributed to Cork City's prestigious designation as UNESCO City of Learning 2015. Over to you, Conal.
Thank you very much. If by chance I'm speaking too quickly, tell me to slow down. If I'm speaking too quietly, tell me to shout out, because I'm inclined to speak sort of fast. So right now I'm slowing right down, and if you find it difficult to understand me, just say it, and I'll readjust. Basically, first of all, just want to say thanks very much. It's we've been through 2 years of sort of chaos with COVID, and a lot of isolation, and a lot of soul searching as individuals and as collective family units and all that. And I just found that during COVID, I have connected online with people, including Goving and other people like that. And it is, it's been my new way of engaging with humanity. And as you mentioned in the piece, that I suppose I'd be known for engaging with my locality, as in the streets that I live in. And I've engaged them for it seems like hundreds of years, because my family are connected to it. And it's a small sort of working class area, like shops and trades and that kind of thing. So for me to suddenly find, friends in the greater world is, it's good for the soul, it's good for the heart. So basically, I just want to say thanks very much for inviting me along to say a few words. Usually in Ireland, it rains. They say that when you're telling the weather in Ireland, that that when you look out, it'll be raining. But if it's not raining, it means that it's going to rain, because it rains out. So right now we're having this amazing sunny weather, which is a huge thing for us. And it sort of makes us a bit happy. So anyway, I'm going to, this morning, what I'm going to talk about, it's sort of it's a vague subject matter, really. It has to do with the heading of the overall conference. And I suppose my topic is knowledge. And I suppose that sense of collective knowledge that a culture might have, that a country might have, in my case, a community, or in some cases, a family. It's a shared knowledge. And I suppose I was thinking about it, and before I start, I should say that I am not in any way an academic. I basically, as you mentioned correctly, I write stories, I write fiction, I write history, I write plays, I make films, but through that, my work is never really driven by story. It's never driven by narrative. My writing is always driven by personality and the characters that I'm writing about, and that in itself is a process of, I suppose, understanding the human condition. And I think maybe through that, I began being invited to speak at universities and various other places. And so in a way, it's through a practical sense that I became, if this is the right way for it, sort of accepted in academic circles. I'm not an academic in any shape or form, but I have a deep love of understanding, and I figured that is what academia is all about. I would hope so. But getting back to my subject, which is knowledge, basically knowledge, what knowledge actually is. It's I actually had to think about it, and then I had to look it up. It's basically accessing the theory and the practical, and being able to then use that in a context of a situation, or a conundrum or whatever. But the sort of the problem with that is that it's a well observed thing that practical and theory are two different things. You know, there's the old saying that, like, in theory, practice and theory are the same thing, but in practice and theory are not the same thing. And I figured that's where knowledge is an interesting one to take in hand, because like traditionally knowledge was basically, when I was a child, put it that way, and for the millennia before that, since humankind walked on this planet, knowledge was about knowing the answers. You would go to a knowledgeable person because they would know the answer. And in a funny way, what happened, I believe, is that in knowing the answer, it gives certain people, often men actually, a certain power, because you would have to go to them for the answer. In recent years, that has changed, because information, it's not about knowing the answer anymore, because the answers, every one of us who are at this committee or at this meeting, we're all looking at computer screens, and every one of us have at our fingertips the answer to any question you want to ask in the world. It's just there. So you don't have to go to an expert anymore. It's all there. And so in a funny way, that in itself has undermined knowledge as being the font of all information. And I think what has sort of come from that is that it means that knowledge is no longer about knowing the right answer. And this sounds like a cliche and it might sound a bit corny, but knowledge is now about asking the right question at the right time. And like, for example, I hope I'm not speaking too quickly. I hope I'm okay, yeah? In traditional knowledge, and knowledge became very elite or elitist. So it was a very special class of individuals held the power of knowledge. In my culture, which would be Ireland, Catholic Ireland, which traditionally would have been a very poor section of the community, our knowledge would have come through our priests. This is before my time, I'm talking about in the past. And in a funny way, back then, the priests spoke in Latin, which was actually a language that nobody understood. So it kept the knowledge within their world. And I remember when I went to school, the big thing was we would learn Latin. And it's only in retrospect I understand that learning is a great thing, and it doesn't matter if you're learning how to peel turnips or how to cook avocado or how to speak Latin. Learning is a good thing. But if you only have a finite amount of time to learn, Latin may not be a priority. That's what I would say, because it seems to me that the essence of humanity, the essence of knowledge basically is how people interact and engage with other people. So if we are to learn a language, surely we should be learning something like Hindi, Urdu, or Chinese, or some African language, or some European language, because that will help us to engage, and through engagement, knowledge is sought, or knowledge is actually found. So it seemed to me that there was this sense of ownership of knowledge by keeping the general people ignorant of what knowledge was. And I suppose what has interested me since is that collective sense of knowledge. From my own personal experience, my education, basically, it seems to me, and because I will also say that anything that I have to say genuinely is of no consequence, because it's only my opinion, and I know nothing, and by knowing nothing, I take no responsibility for what I might know. But the thing is that in my education, it was very much about like learning in through the eye or through the ear and out through the hand, where you'd write down the answer or you'd speak the answer, but there was no education of the emotions or education of the heart or education of engagement. It was about, this is the question, this is the answer. If you know that, then you're educated. And I think that was a mistake in my education. I'm talking about in my culture, so I'm not speaking for other cultures across the world, because I really don't know. But in my little Irish experience of growing up here, that was very much what education was about. It was about learning answers, not really figuring them out. Another issue that I had with education was that at that time in my life, all I really wanted to do was climb trees, chase dogs, go fishing, kick a football. So to put me and another 30 or 40 children sitting in a room for like 5 hours a day, every day, to me seems an awful waste of our energy or youth. And the funny thing is, when you reach my old age now, suddenly people my age are going to like doctors and things, and doctors are saying, oh, you need to go walking, you need to go fishing. And I'm saying, that's what I wanted to do back then. And they said, no, you must do this. Whereas now, at this stage in my life, this is the right time for formal education, because first of all, I have enough information in my inner self, in my inner soul, to actually comprehend what is supposed to be. So, for example, when I was 8, 9 years of age, we would have had an English teacher, lovely man. I still know him. He's an elderly man now, but he'd have been talking about poetry and the beauty and the imagery. And truthfully, I was probably, in my 30s before I understood what he was talking about. So here was a man in his 30s telling us what he was feeling, but at that time was the wrong time for us, I think, to be trying to absorb that understanding, because we didn't have life's experience. And meanwhile, our experiences of things like playing with animals, climbing trees, jumping in lakes, fishing, whatever you might do, cycling bicycles, that is the experience we should have been undertaking in order to be informed further knowledge later on in life. But so once again, it was a bit that it just seems to me that knowledge and education were all about facts, knowing the answer, rather than understanding, I suppose, understanding the self, your own self, and your people around you, and your friends and your family, and the complications that some people have, and learning to deal with that. There was I suppose, and then as I was saying earlier, that whole thing of language being so important, because as life has gone on, I've been very privileged, really, that what I do, my writing and my plays and the films, allow me to travel to different cultures and meet people. And my biggest regret is that, yes, I meet people and we engage on a great level, but not having their language fluently, it means you miss out on so much. You miss out the subtlety of everything. So in a way, all their knowledge is lost on me because it comes down to very basic communications. So I'm a firm believer that that education should be all about communication. And I think all the other stuff, the facts, the numbers, all that, they're all inside in computers for all of us to access for the rest of our lives, in retirement if we want. But once you can speak languages, it opens up your knowledge banks, basically. And I mentioned earlier that that knowledge is held by like power, and you would see this in my case, in my culture. It would have been, I suppose, religion would have held that power very tightly. But there are other sort of, I suppose, people who are disenfranchised from knowledge. And I think every culture, including and Ireland absolutely, would have a caste system, but mightn't call it that. But there are certain sections of our community who instinctively we know that they're just not given the same access as everybody else. And this isn't just about poverty, it's about a section of a very identifiable section. I'd rather not name or identify in this conversation, because then I only, in a way, sort of reinforce that stereotype. And there are a few different levels, but it's almost invisible to the naked eye. So, for example, a prime example, I was walking along my street a few weeks back with an American friend, and there were 3 people who walked past us, and they walked into, I suppose, a bar, a pub, and I just mentioned to this American friend, I said, they won't get served. They were ahead of us up the street. And he turned and said, how do you mean? And next thing, they were out onto the street. So he wouldn't have even been aware that I was aware, and everybody else would have been aware that there was a big prejudice against this. And culturally we're the same. They've been in Ireland for thousands of years, the same as we have. So it's not a new population, but there is a bias there. And the funny thing is, it's changing, and it's changing slowly. But the knowledge of that community, in a funny way, is not given the same respect as the knowledge of, we say, my community, right? And plus, there's communities that are probably more accepted than my community, who won't accept the broad level of knowledge that I would have of living in the streets and all that kind of thing. So I find that sort of disenfranchised of sections of the community, or of a community, or of a culture, it actually causes havoc with the general knowledge, because what you'll often find is that often the disenfranchised groups, their knowledge is often a knowledge in a time of crisis you must turn to. So, for example, if there is major fuel price crisis down the road, or even financial crisis, if you're from a culture that's used to living with very little, they've learned devices that we have forgotten. And so that kind of knowledge is actually priceless, and it's every bit as priceless as the classics or whatever, or even, as we would know it, government. Their knowledge of self-government within their communities is just as vital and just as valid. And I think that's what I'm saying. And of course, sorry, pardon me. There's also, there are many different castes. A prime example would be women, or the female of the species. For example, I come from a family of, I have 8 sisters, and my mother comes from a family of 10 sisters. So I suppose just instinctively I would know the female narrative. I'd be aware of it because I grew up with 8 older sisters, and I had all these aunts around the house. But what's interesting is that from my little perspective of this little world that I live in, I can see that for hundreds of years, if within the community or if within a family somebody was ill, for example, if somebody wasn't well, it was like a mother or a sister or somebody would actually care for that person. And over millennia, over hundreds of years, they had become experts, if you want to use that word, in helping people who aren't well. They would know how to care for people, how to care for things. And then suddenly, when it became a science, or when it became profitable to be so, suddenly all the females were sort of frog-leaped or left, and you'd find that all the medical specialists were men. And you're saying, how did that happen? How come it was always the women were the people who looked after people and got people well? And then suddenly, when it's sort of transposed into sort of a knowledgeable elite place, suddenly it's men are the experts in all this. And I found that intriguing. And it's not just health. For example, traditionally, you will find that I'm talking about like over millennia. Now, this isn't just Ireland in the last 20, 30 years, because things are changing. But traditionally, certain aspects of household life, for example, like keeping a household, that being things like budgeting, feeding, making very little food go a long way, all this kind of stuff. Basically, that whole thing of home economics was, in the past, the domain of, for the most part, the females. And then suddenly, when it became a science and when it became financially viable and also a thing of importance, suddenly all the top chefs are male. And I think, okay, that's interesting, but there's a disconnect here. And to the point that sometimes home cooking is almost considered a bit like amateur drama, that it's not the real thing. It's like, oh, sure, we'll make this and for the home cooking. And you're thinking, that's actually, it's knowledge snobbery is what I'd call it. And it's actually also, it's making knowledge an elitist thing. And I think that in itself is, for want of a better word, it's dangerous. It's definitely not productive for us as a culture or as a society. And then finally, I would say that knowledge has always been perceived to be an old person's domain. So you would go to the wise old man or the wise old woman because they have had life's experience. You go to them and they will, they will enlighten you, put it that way, right? And that's been all turned on its head because as an old man, I know, right, that when I need help, I go to my nieces and nephews. They're the people who know they know the knowledge of, for example, how to hook up my computer, how do I get this going, and I think are we good?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Conal, for your share. My personal takeaways was this phrase that you made use of, that was knowledge snobbery. And the wisdom that you spoke about at the end, knowledge is all person's domain. And I could really connect that with wisdom, and that was really nice. And what I really liked about you, what you shared was that there has to be a collective sense of knowledge, and the teachers have now become facilitators, and they have to work towards those skills wherein students can find answers on their own, which is really, really required. And it is not only a fact that the students need to learn. So that was really a wonderful share. Thank you so much. And I'm sure all our attendees would have been benefited from this. Friends, in case any of you has any questions from Conal, you can ask. You can raise your hand in case you have a question. Conal, it seems there is no question. In case there are any questions, we will let you know, and then perhaps you can answer that later.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. It's very nice to be invited along, and it's just great to be connected up, and I'll talk to you as it goes on. Bless you. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much.
Bless you.
Okay, friends, our next speaker is Buthinia. Buthinia, are you here? Conal, we will be making you an attendee now, and Buthinia, we will be making you the presenter now.
Hello, good morning. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Give us a second, Buthinia.
I am going to share my screen. I think I can do it from here.
All right, fine. And I'll just read out your bio, and thereafter then you can start your presentation by the time you share your screen. Is that fine?
Yes.
Wonderful. So by the time you do it, I'll just read out your bio.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have our next speaker with us today, Dr. Bethania Mujol. She has around 20 years of teaching experience. Her areas of specialization are world literature, comparative literature, film studies, digital pedagogy, and communication. She is the author of several books, academic articles, and 5 collections of poems. She delivered presentations at several national and international conferences in Tunisia and other foreign countries. She has also organized several academic events. She's a FICRA ambassador in Tunisia. She's also the founder, chair of Arts and Humanities Global Network, vice chair of Global Network of Liberal Arts, steering committee member of Challenging Precarity Network. She's also a member of Scientific Committee of Research Laboratory Language and Cultural Forms. Over to you, Bethania. We are looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank you for the invitation, to thank Professor Gavin for the invitation, and for organizing such an amazing event. I would like to say hi to Conal. It was very interesting listening to your talk, and I will try to build on it. So when I received the invitation, I said to myself, what will I talk about? My field is literature. And then I tried to link it a little bit to every subject that was presented yesterday and today. So I'm simply sticking to my field, which is literature. So reading and teaching literature otherwise. I will try to follow this order. First reading literature otherwise, then teaching it otherwise, then asking the big question, which is the death of literature as a discipline. Reading literature otherwise, the new one, which is still, it's an old but new role, which is imitating to life, the mere embodiment of the wealth and health of a nation, a window of the world, communicating culture, and somehow establishing international exchanges over culture. When we discuss books, when we discover about others in books, as Conor was saying, and also it has the function of entertaining. I think that it creates this kind of work-life balance and stress management, because we resort to literature every now and then to find the refuge, sometimes to escape from the world, some others to just feel reassured that we're not alone. So it also instructs to life, making life easier in the future, and sometimes, or most of the time, literature is an eye-opening experience. Another role is that of historicizing. It makes the archive and provides different versions, for the type of truth, if there is anything called truth at all. And this is through different genres who could be examined as one. For example, Hayden Weiss considers the literary characters, often from modernist novels and plays, as witnesses against historical way of thinking. And Hutchin claims that we have to examine the very nature of narratives as a major human system of understanding. So whether this is in fiction, all types of texts, history, philosophy, or anthropology. We need literature for this new world order we're going through. We need literature for this age that Salman Rushdie calls anything can happen. Reality has become crazier than fiction. And Nietzsche compares life to literature and links life to literature and literature to life. And in his The Birth of Tragedy, he gives sense to a monotone. He thinks that literature, or telling those stories and reading about those stories, creating our own stories, gives sense to our monotone, that what could have been a monotone life, rendering it full of magic and unexpected happening. So means that literature is the narrative we live by, okay? Zizek, for this New World Order, published a book recently. The title of the book is, as you can see, is Pandemic or Panic, and he tried to examine the human and the reaction of the human to this COVID-19 crisis and what we've learned. So I think that the next generation, my daughters or their children, are going to read this book with much more interest, and it is going to be a piece of history. Lessons from literature. The best teaching, says Doris Lessing, is a good library. Means that, by the way, Doris Lessing thinks that the role of universities, though I'm teaching at a university, is to brainwash us, to impose a certain reading a certain way of reading things, but I'm sure that now it's more than that. That's why Lessing thinks that the real education is a good library. In books, we can find warning and prophecies, but we learn nothing. Fables, satires, Sufi tales, humorous tales, and else, and all different genres. Like, for example, in Amin Malouf's anthologies, autobiographical works and novels, Doris Lessing's space fiction anthology, autobiographical works, to state a few, Rushdie's novels, Shakespearean texts. I've discovered lately Conal's literature, which is, I think that I could put it on the same shelf as history books. So as Derrida says, all books contain the amalgamation of a certain number of age-old truths. We should resort to them every now and then to understand, to stop and stare at this chaos around us. Rushdie says, normality, that's the myth. Human beings aren't normal. This is in Shalimar the Clown, but also true in life, I can confirm. In another novel, an impressive piece of work, he satirically claims one must kill and kill and kill, one must destroy and destroy. Only after years of mayhem can a measure of stable beauty be achieved. This is the meaning of civilization. Such statements and such books should make us think, but we never learn. We are not, because we are not gods, but wounded creatures, as Rushdie says, in imaginary homelands, cracked lenses capable only of fractured perceptions. Amin Malouf says in Samarkand, ne t'étonne de rien, la réalité a deux visages, les hommes aussi. Should not be surprised. Nothing should surprise you, okay? Reality and truth has two sides, also men. In Shikasta, Doris Lessing uses the voice of Johor the messenger to remind us that we never learn. People, poor people of the past, poor people, so many of them, for long thousands of years, not knowing anything, fumbling and stumbling and longing for something different, but not knowing what had happened to them and what they longed for. These are lessons we never imagined. All are together. Here we are. And I think that this is true in every situation now that we're seeing what is going on in the world order. And literature is important because writers sometimes play the role of prophets, but also they act like politicians. They are, and Rushdie thinks that they are rivals. Okay, they try to make the world in their own image, both the writers and the politicians, and their tool is the narrative. Doris Lessing had this prophecy, and she says that, and I think that this shows that our human nature does not change, which is it's frightening. These are times it's frightening to be alive when it is hard to think of human beings as rational creatures, brutality, stupidity, and we live in a descent into barbarism. So the writers have this important role of shedding light on the ailments of society and also speak the truth that some people who are forbidden to say it or do not have the capacity to say it or the right tools or the enough exposure or enough guts as well might not dare to say it, as Foucault says. There is this great mass of new information from universities, back to the idea of university and being brainwashed by a whole system, whereas you can freedom in books. You can find freedom in books, research institutions, and from gifted amateurs. But our ways of governing ourselves haven't been changed. Means that even if we go, if we learn, if we have those institutions that are trying to civilize us, to teach us about life, it's not there where we should go. It's not there where we could grasp the very meaning of life itself. Because life, as in literature, when you open literature, you feel like you're opening a catalog where virtue versus vices, aesthetic versus bowed, God against the devil, that's the game. Mesdames et messieurs, faites vos jeux, says Rushdie. Back into universities and teaching literature otherwise, because I think that we should really think the teachings of literature, there are those 6 approaches, just to stick to the book: the language-based approach, the paraphrastic approach, the information-based approach, the personal response approach, moral philosophical approach, and the stylistic approach. So these are the different ways of approaching a literary text. But I think that the most important thing in teaching literature is in the selection process of the text that we are going to introduce to the learners. And the selection should be related to their context. It's good to study the canons. It's very important, and I'm going to show you some examples. But it's more important to have a message and to succeed in making them love the fact of reading, because nobody's reading these days, okay? And advocate a cultural poetics, means that the cultural poetical approach, which is linking the text to the context of the writer, to the context of the reader. And this problem is even intensified of not reading when we mention teaching in the digital age. Yes, the books are the plane and the space and the road and the train. There is something magical about them. They are an impressive experience, but let's try to push people to read first. So there are new teaching tools that are open to us now, which are, for example, the MOOCs, the augmented reality, the virtual reality, those video conferences system open now to all of us. The world is a village. And the blended and flipped classroom as a teaching method. So research in education and advocating a multidisciplinary approach to teaching are very, very important in order to put literature in a different receptacle. For example, using platforms and also the MOOC. I always choose Shakespeare because whenever I take a MOOC, it's related to Shakespeare. And here is a video that I found online, for example, and I think that this MOOC is very, very impressive because this is another way of teaching Shakespeare, okay? This MOOC taking you traveling to the world.
My name is Professor Jonathan Bate. I'm a Shakespeare scholar, and this is a MOOC called Shakespeare and His World. This MOOC is unique and exciting because it's a collaboration between Warwick University and the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. What we're doing is approaching Shakespeare, his times, and his works through the
Okay, so you can find it online. It's one of the available MOOCs. Another one that I took lately, which is Shakespeare's Hamlet, the Ghost, and you can scan the QR code and look at the teaser. There are questions, and I think that this is a new experience and you should be inspired by this. And whenever I add a MOOC to my courses, but adding it to a list of reading list. This is the reading list, but these are the MOOCs that you could take and you could receive a certificate at the end. And as you can see, it's self-paced. Students are more motivated and interested because this is their language. The digital field is their language. Also immersing experiences into language learning, but also into virtual universes. And these are now available to us. Of course, this is not 100% of one way of teaching, but incorporating this in the curricula will be very interesting. Also, you can scan the QR code that I generated for this course, which is the first lecture delivered via hologram, and I'm trying to use that in my drama class, and it works. They are impressed by technology, but also this is an embedded way of teaching literature, might be an embedded way of teaching literature. So innovative practices are good because they offer us new receptacles for literature and new shapes, okay? The death of literature, no, I don't believe in this. And the question always comes back. It's rather this expression of old wine in a new bottle. Eco says that literature is crucial to life. It allows us to tell our stories and survive through them. The text becomes the receptacle and depository of our own fears, hopes, and interpretation of life. We need literature to give sense and essence to our humanity. It enhances critical thinking and allows us to stop and stare at the world and think about the ailments of our time. It widens the scope of our knowledge. And it has sometimes this spiritual function of looking at words, thinking about sensing things, means that dreaming, even if it is not a romantic story, you know, imagination could lead us in the cobweb of our thought, of our brain, that magical engine. It allows us to regain our humane side, to think about our humanity. Also, it enhances concentration. I'm sure that you've noticed that nowadays these digital natives, they lost any sense of concentration, and it could prevent from extremism and fundamentalism when you stop and read books like, for example, Another Jihadi Jane by Tabish Khair, or if you read the whole gambit of literature that was published. So back to that idea, from old wine in a new bottle to readers are leaders, and this is what history confirms. So what literature for our uncertain times? I think that literature is linked to those two syndromes, which are, it could happen to me and I'm not alone. It could happen to me means you're frightened when you read it, but I'm not alone because, okay, it could happen to somebody else. It's there. And I think that this is what I personally discovered when I immersed into the literature of pandemics, and I've discovered the vivid testimonies of literature that was written. There is even a book about the history of pandemics, and I've learned a lot, and it reassured me somehow to know that, okay, all those pandemics took a couple or 4 years and they're gone, and man was able to overcome and to go on living. Also, literature offers us this possibility to look at it from the lenses of Nietzsche, who excuses our fragile human nature and say, human, all too human. I love also this expression of Candide that Rushdie uses in 2 years. The land might belong to the landowner, but the garden, our imagination, belongs to the gardener. This was the power of horticultural art. Il faut cultiver son jardin. And so let the magic of literature triumph over the ugliness of the time, to use Rushdie's words. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope this was interesting and relevant to the subject of the conference.
Thank you so much, Betania. We definitely enjoyed it a lot. And if I talk about my personal takeaways, I could really understand, coming from English literature background myself, that literature gives sense and essence to humanity. So this was really wonderful. And one thing that I really liked when you mentioned literature reading is an escape from the world and brings around the work-life balance. And this is definitely very true. Even I've studied Shakespeare, and the way it takes you away from the real world. But of course, we still stay in the real world, and we know the way things happen. So it is really beautiful reading. And I love metaphysical poetry a lot. So besides Shakespeare, so that is also something of interest. So ladies and gentlemen, my friends, audience members, do you have any questions from Betania? So she can answer them right now. Since Betania, we do not have any questions. In case there are any, we will send them across to you, and then you can answer those questions.
I think Conal wanted to say something. Yeah. Yeah. He was raising his hand, I think.
Who is raising?
Conal Creeder.
Okay, Conal, do you have Conal? Conal, do you have a question for Betania?
I'm reading his literature, so maybe we will have a conversation later on about this.
Just a minute, let me just check. Okay, we have just given you we have enabled your mic, Conal. In case you have a question, you can now speak. We cannot hear you. Just a minute. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. We have made you the presenter now.
Okay, so unmuting. Okay, you can hear me now, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Basically, yeah, you're talking about literature and reading. And I suppose the question I want to ask was, I don't teach. I go to universities and I talk, but I make a point of saying, guys, I know nothing, so I can't teach you. But sometimes I meet people who want me to teach them how to write. So teaching how to write is so different, because I'm saying, I'm writing for 30 years and I'm still learning. I can't, if I knew how to do it, I'd be a multimillionaire, right? But people assume that reading and writing are the same thing. Do you find that in your teaching experience or in university, people doing literature intending to, are sort of saying, but we want to be a writer, and you're saying, well, you know.
I don't think that everyone can write, and you're right, you're talking about creative writing rather, or teaching people. Yes, there are things that could be taught, for example, how to follow a specific order in academic means that in academic way, but for creative writing, there should be something about, there should be a lot of reading, and it's a unique experience. I don't think that everyone could write in the way you write, for example. I can see that I started reading your books, and I've discovered that you're into history, and you're historicizing somehow, and there is something about your own books, but I don't think that it is open to anyone. Reading, what I meant by reading literature is read to learn. Read, back to your idea of learning, the importance of learning. Read to learn about the world, read to understand the world, read to have that sense of critical thinking to acquire this. But writing beautifully and those expressions and the dreaming about the world, or this is something I think that is yeah, it's very different. It's quite different. It's like, for example, I ask you to write a book about a historical epoch or a specific topic, and asking you to write a poem. It's different. The poem comes spontaneously, whether you have it or you don't.
You can't say this many words, that many words, this many, because yeah. No, in my line of business, I'm regularly invited to come and teach writing, and I used to go, and then I realized I can't, because I don't know how to do it. If I knew it, it's like, yeah, I just don't know, and I don't even know if my stuff is good. I think it's, it's all a struggle in my head. So I can't say, it's not like driving a car. Did you do this? It's a sort of a finder. Okay, I don't want to take up any more time, but I thought that because that whole thing of literature, reading and writing, it's a bit of a, two sides of the same coin, but very different sides. Lovely listening to your piece. Great talk, and we'll be. Bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, both of you. Okay, we will be making you attendees now, and then we invite over Jennifer Errington, who's our next speaker, and we will be making her the presenter now. Thank you.
Hello. You hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jennifer. How are you doing?
Wonderful. I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm also doing great. My name is Anjali Jennifer. And Jennifer, do you have any PPT to share?
I do, yes.
All right. So we have made you the presenter, and you can share your PPT now. Right. And by the time you share your PPT, I will introduce your bio to everyone. Is that fine?
That is perfect. I am just pulling it up now.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me now welcome our next speaker, Jennifer A. Errington. She is the owner of the law offices of Jennifer A. Errington and specializes in business litigation, personal injury, and criminal defense. She is the founder and managing partner of the Errington Law Firm, PLLC, and offers legal services in entertainment, law, and criminal defense across North Carolina and South Carolina. As a lawyer, business owner, and actor, she understands the importance of protecting the assets you work for so hard to create. Her philosophy is zealous and diligent advocate for her clients. She is a Charlotte native and the member of the Young Affiliates of the Mint. She is also an avid golfer and volunteers with the first T of Greater Charlotte. Over to you, Jennifer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I am so excited to move into the world of entertainment law and discuss issues of intellectual property as they relate to NFTs. So we are shifting over to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and non-fungible tokens. So again, just to recap my bio, thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, and I'm so excited to talk to you. So that we will get started. So a general outline for my presentation today, we'll go over what an NFT is, do a brief intellectual property review, and then talk about some legal issues that I've encountered in my practice in the area of entertainment law and artists and NFTs, followed by, if we have time, a Q&A session. So what is an NFT? So here are actually a couple examples I pulled from OpenSea, which is the marketplace for NFT, as well as Google, and it's a very wide variety. So there's no one definition of what an NFT is, but it's essentially some form of a representation of artwork. And so an NFT is referred to as a non-fungible token, which is something that cannot be substituted. It's unique, it is exceptional, unlike money or currency, for example, that is fungible, a one-to-one ratio, it's easy to exchange. An NFT, the great value of an NFT is that it is unique. And it is a digital asset that is created that represents another asset or artwork, typically in the physical world. It is given a unique code, which again gives it that very non-fungible characteristic. And an NFT exists with that code on the blockchain. And the most common blockchain is Ethereum. And just so we're all on the same page what a blockchain is, it's essentially a digital record that is created for all of the transactions that involve NFTs. So anytime somebody creates an NFT, sells it, trades it, that generates a unique piece of code, and all those codes are linked together into a giant string of software and computer code that is known as the blockchain. As we said, Ethereum is the most common, and just so you can kind of get a concept, the Ether is the actual digital currency. That's the Bitcoin that's used. You can also use US or any other kind of currency, but it's most often you're purchasing NFTs with Bitcoin. And an Ether is a Bitcoin, and one Ether is equivalent to about 3,127 US dollars. And that was the amount I actually checked this morning, my time. So the price does fluctuate. So the question is, what is the artwork? What is the underlying asset? So typically, these pieces of artwork exist in the digital medium. So it can be art, music, images, moments in time, such as very notorious sport events, memorable moments, concerts, things like that. Videos and tweets can also be in the underlying artwork. So NFTs are created from these digital representations. So a photograph, you can create an NFT and essentially assign a unique code that exists in the blockchain to that artwork. You can also have a physical representation of artwork. So again, art, books, and houses or property can be turned into NFTs, meaning you can take a picture of a house or a picture of a monument and then turn that into an NFT. So one of the big questions, and a lot of times I have clients ask me, well, what is the benefit? Why should I have an NFT? What's the difference versus just not having an art collection or going out and purchasing a physical, tangible piece of an asset? And number one, it certifies authenticity. So think about it this way. If an artist or a photographer takes a photograph and doesn't sign it, just takes the photograph and you purchase it, that has value. But if an artist takes a photograph and signs it, that's a level of authentication certifying that this is original, it's unique, it is what it purports to be, and there's an additional added value to that signature. It's kind of a stamp of authenticity. That's the same thing with having an NFT. So if I have a piece of artwork from a collector, it's essentially a way to collect art, right? So if I have an artwork from a collector, perhaps I can turn that into an NFT myself to show that now I have a unique code that's then linked to that artwork. So it's a way to authenticate and verify it. There's also a very large feeling of exclusivity and value in the NFT community, that if I have this digital asset that has a unique code that only belongs to me, I have it to the exclusion of everyone else. I have value because it's now very rare. So again, as you can imagine, an NFT is unique. They're very secure. It's very difficult to hack into the blockchain. It's very difficult to manipulate the code. So it's a very, very secure way of owning artwork. And it's easy to transfer. Operating with Bitcoin, operating with NFTs on OpenSea, it's extremely user-friendly. It's very, very easy. There's not a lot of loopholes and things you have to go through to trade and to purchase NFTs. So it's very easy to use. One interesting thing that I've encountered with NFTs that I think really challenges the roles of attorneys moving forward is the concept of a smart contract. Every NFT has a smart contract associated with it. And a smart contract is a digital contract that, again, has its own unique code that also exists on the blockchain, and it's paired with the NFT. They govern the NFTs, including ownership, intellectual property rights, restrictions on who can do what with the NFT, and they are accessible. These smart contracts are accessible to every person down the blockchain. So every time an NFT is purchased, traded, etc., all these transactions are recorded in a smart contract. They are accessible to anyone who wants to go on OpenSea and view the NFT. So it's very, very open. And another quality is that, again, they are secure, and it's difficult to alter or to change the smart contract. It is set in the code. And the interesting thing is that the smart contract is 100% automated, and it self-executes, meaning there's no third party, there's no attorney writing these contracts. The contracts, it's built into the code that when something happens, it triggers something else. So if there's a buy and a sell, that's embedded in the code. So it's pretty easy to read these. Essentially, visit a website, this etherscan.io, and you copy the code from the actual NFT, just copy and paste it. You put it in the Etherscan to read, and it decodes the contract, and then you suddenly have plain English that you can read and decipher the contract. So again, it raises interesting questions about the roles of attorneys and what's going to happen moving forward, that if contracts become more and more automated and really serve a purpose and don't need third parties or attorneys, it's interesting, to think what might happen. And there is a proposition that perhaps we would get to a point where the smart contracts could be converted into a Word document that spells everything out and actually generate a paper copy of the contract that lawyers can then use to conduct business. So the role of lawyers that we discussed. And just so you can see, this is a screenshot from OpenSea. OpenSea is available to anyone, and I do encourage you to just take 10, 15 minutes this weekend. Go to OpenSea.com. There's thousands and thousands of NFT. Everything's open. It's so interesting to look at. And so this is an NFT. And as you can see here, there is the contract code. So right on the page, there's the alphanumeric code. You can click on the contract and you can read all about it. So it's very, very simple. And I think a lot of people are, and especially clients that I talk to, they are very daunted by the idea of NFTs and crypto. But it is very, very accessible. It just takes a little bit of time to get into it and start understanding how it works. So a very brief intellectual property review before we get into the second half of the discussion about the legal issues I've encountered with NFTs. So based in US jurisdiction and US federal law, there's 3 types of intellectual property: copyright, which covers original works of authorship. They are created when an author immediately reduces their idea or creative work to a fixed tangible medium, meaning the author creates the picture, creates the photograph, reduces their idea to a screenplay. Once it's fixed, then a copyright attaches. Once you have a copyright, you have several rights. You can reproduce the work, display the work, sell the work, or create derivative works, essentially works that derive from the original copyright. So copyright is the most prevalent in the NFT world. That's where most issues come up, not so much in the other two. So we're going to focus for this presentation on copyright issues. Another type of intellectual property is trademark, and this refers to a word, phrase, symbol, or design, and it's used to identify goods and services. Once you have a trademark, that helps you protect your brand, it helps you guard against fraud and counterfeiting from other people and excluding others from using your business name. So McDonald's, Nike, their trademarks, the M, the check, those are all registered trademarks. And lastly, just to be complete, patents are rights that are granted to somebody who invents something or designs something. And upon the granting of a patent, your rights is that you can use the design or the invention, and you're only allowed exclusivity for a certain amount of time. You cannot have a patent for life. So with that, let's move into the intellectual property issues. So most often I encounter copyright questions and licensing questions in my practice. And just to set this in context, I represent a lot of artists, photographers, actors, athletes as well. So really the entire entertainment world. And if you look at the news and know Steph Curry, Jay-Z, a lot of large entertainers are getting into NFTs and paying large amounts of money for that exclusivity, upwards of millions of dollars even, for some of the NFTs. But you'll see in a couple slides, the size of the market it's incredibly daunting for how many people are trading and doing NFTs. So for copyright, two scenarios that I typically encounter. One is that an artist's work is created into an NFT, and then somebody else is taking that NFT and doing something with it. They're displaying it, selling it, trying to make money off of it. So the artist's copyright is being infringed because the copyright would likely remain with the original creator of the work. And now somebody is creating NFTs and making money off of this artist's work. The other scenario is that if a creator or a client wants to create an NFT, but they don't know who has the copyright, they don't know if they can or not. So before any infringements happen, they come to me saying, hey, what are my rights? And interestingly, I currently have a case or a potential case with a client whose mother was a hair and makeup artist in Hollywood for 30 years. And on set, she took photographs of all kinds of actors, actresses, one-of-a-kind, incredible photographs that have never been published. And so they have a collection in their family of 40, 50 photographs. And this client said, can I make an NFT of these photographs? These could make a lot of money. They're incredibly rare. And imagine making an NFT of an already rare photograph. And the problem is we have to find out who has the original copyright, because my client can't take those photographs and start making NFTs if the copyright belongs to someone else. And very often on movie sets, you sign contracts with the production, and they very, very clearly say, no photographs, anything you take is property of the production. And so the fact that his mother was taking all these incredibly rare photographs, she probably doesn't have copyright in those photographs because she wasn't really authorized to take them in the first place. And they would most likely belong to production. So kind of a real world example. And so then the question comes down to then who owns the copyright? Is it the artist or is it the buyer and the seller? And we'll see how the buyer and the seller can gain those copyrights. So big picture, most important is that creating an NFT does not automatically give you intellectual property rights. Something has to happen to be able to transfer those rights. Another just interesting case is called a work for hire case. And in that scenario, somebody commissions an artist to create a picture, painting, etc., a one-time commission. And then the artist who painted the picture or took the photograph maybe wants to take and create an NFT of their own work. Well, then the question is who owns those copyrights? And oftentimes it's the employer, it's the commissioner who asks somebody to create the artwork they retain the copyright. So even if an artist creates something themselves, depending on the employment contract or what the agreement is, that artist might not be able to have the copyright to then go create NFTs of their own work. A couple doctrines that we see, a couple exceptions that exist that always come into play to consider is the fair use doctrine, which is also called fair dealing in other jurisdictions. And that refers to somebody who's allowed to use copyright works without permission for very limited. So these are works that already have copyright, but these are the exceptions. So even though there is a copyright, you're good to use them. Criticism, offering them for comment, education, research, and news reportings. So, you know, perhaps moving forward, somebody might want to create an NFT for education purposes or for research. Maybe a student is going to be writing a paper on NFTs and they want to create an NFT for research. That might be a way for them to be able to use and create an NFT of a copyrighted work. And another concept is the public domain. These are copyrighted works that, these are works where there's no copyright at all. They are in the public domain. They are free to use. You don't need the permission of the copyright holder. You can take them, sell them, display them, make money, completely open. And public domain works usually lack sufficient originality. And this is interesting with NFTs and advising clients because, what if I put a smiley face on a piece of paper? Can I turn that into an NFT? Do I have copyright over that? Is there sufficient originality? Probably not. At some point, if you reduce something that becomes so simple and repeated, there's really not going to be much originality or a way to get any copyright protection. But if there's some amount, it's minimal, that's the standard, but if there's some amount of originality, then perhaps you can get a copyright attached to that. Or a copyright if it has expired over time. So any works before 1927, they are not copyrighted. And interestingly, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City in 2017 released 375,000 pieces of artwork into the public domain. So that could be a very interesting concept for somebody who's interested in actual classical art and creating NFTs. And for instance, this picture by Monet from the late 1890s is now in the public domain. So just to give you an idea that the artwork that's been released is extremely well known. So when I have a case and I'm looking at a potential copyright infringement, typically there are two options. The first is to go directly to the marketplace. So if a client comes to me and says, I think that I have a piece of artwork that's being infringed upon, somebody's making copies, selling it, we can go directly to the source and submit a complaint. It's very simple, there's a fast resolution, and it's less costly. However, there's no precedent created. There's no binding legal action. It's only done on the marketplace, and it can take care of the problem quickly, but if it's thousands and millions of dollars, and if one day I'm representing Kanye West and he wants to sue for infringement, we're probably not going to go to marketplace because there's millions and millions of dollars at stake, which feeds into the other option of proceeding with litigation and filing a formal infringement lawsuit. Get a court ruling. It is much more expensive, but again, it is binding, and it does set an example for future cases. And being that this is a brand new area and there's no case law, there's no precedent, intellectual properties, the classical rules are applying as some of the issues are coming up. But, it's my hope that at least some people do file some sort of action litigation so we can actually see some kind of precedent for how the courts are actually dealing with this. And of course, it's final. So if there is an infringement, what are the damages? What are the penalties? So of course, money damages, they can be thousands or millions of dollars depending on how rare the NFT is. And the market demands the price. So one day the NFT could be worth $500,000. The next day it could be $2 million. And depending on when litigation happens or when these infringements happen, that could have a huge difference. And there's a thing called statutory damages. in US law for copyright, and it can be $750 to $300,000 per infringement. So if somebody is taking that NFT and replicating it numerous times, they could potentially be incurring multiple cases of infringement, and you could really see those damages increase. The NFT most typically is just taken off the market. So if we go the route of going to OpenSea, taking it off the market, or filing the complaint, and if the market decides that there is an infringement, they'll just delete it, disable the user's account. So again, if you're looking at a client or somebody who has invested a lot of money or has created an entire business around NFTs, they could lose their entire account, and there's no duty to tell them. So if somebody could file a complaint, and then if it's ruled against the infringer, they could wake up and everything could be gone, and including their digital wallet. And the digital wallet is essentially where your Bitcoin and your NFT references are stored as well. So that could be compromised. So one of the last issues that we're going to talk about is licensing. And another important point, that the way to get intellectual property rights is to make sure that there is a provision in the smart contract or the real contract that allows for a license or assignments of the original intellectual property rights. And it's important that license is not ownership, meaning if the original creator has IP rights, they can license those rights out to further users down the blockchain, further buyers and sellers. If there's 100 people, the original terms of the NFT can say, I will license out these IP rights to you, meaning you can continue to make copies, sell them, etc. But I'm not transferring my ownership. So subsequent purchasers don't have and don't obtain IP rights. They just have the license to use them, to be able to do what they want with them. And again, it's contained in the smart contract or the legal contract. And there are instances when parties will create an actual written legal contract document that exists outside of the blockchain. And in those contracts, the owner can grant rights, including constraints, meaning perhaps they only want subsequent purchasers to only use it and display it for personal use. Perhaps they don't want them selling it. So no resale. Or they do want them to resell, and the original copyright owner wants royalties. So each time this NFT is sold, I want to put it into my smart contract that I get 10% royalty, and that's in perpetuum. So every time it's sold, they're incurring 10% royalties. And just to give you an idea, as I referenced earlier about the size of the market, $41 billion was the value of the NFT market at the end of last year. And there are 250,000 trades happening on OpenSea per week. And the average price of an NFT is about $200. So a significant amount of money, but we're not looking at millions and millions, meaning the size of the industry is growing. More and more clients and entertainers are getting into the NFT business, and you don't even have to be an entertainer. It can be anyone. I have NFTs. It's a really interesting, unique way to become an art collector in the modern era, and a way of certifying that the art you have is authentic. And then you can also become a fast-paced trader of different artwork. So the main takeaways: we don't have laws or precedent yet, but we can apply our standard IP laws to that. Your IP is not automatically created. You need to find a way to transfer those in order for subsequent users to be able to use your IP. And in every scenario, always do due diligence for who has the original intellectual property rights and what subsequent users can then do or not do. So with that, I will ask if there are any questions. And if there's not, there's my information. Please feel free to email me, WhatsApp me, follow me on Instagram. I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Thank you, Jennifer, for such an informative session for all of us. And even I was not aware of this NFT and the digital asset and digital medium. And I'm sure all the participants would have been able to understand what this is all about. Friends, in case you have any questions, you can tell us right now. You can raise your hand, and then Jennifer can take up those questions. It seems like we do not have any questions. You've shared your details with us, And in case there are any, we will send them across to you.
Perfect. Thank
And
you.
we would now be making you an attendee. So good evening, everyone, to all the dignitaries, the speakers, the members of the audience, and my dear students. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this online conference to everyone present here. First of all, I would like to thank our Dean Ma'am, Dr. Manju Gupta, who has given me the opportunity to deliver this vote of thanks to everyone. On behalf of the entire institute, I would like to thank all the speakers. The program would not have been complete without your presence and inspiring words. I would also like to thank Professor Govind for his constant encouragement and support. I would also like to thank our technical team, Mr. Santosh, Mr. Bhupinder, and Mr. Vikas, and their support staff who ensured that the conference runs smoothly. I'm sure all of you would agree that it is a real challenge to conduct a conference online. Then I would also like to extend my gratitude to our student, Saksham, Sonia, and other students of BCA who helped me during these 2 days taking care of every single technicalities in this particular program. Shruti ma'am, thank you so much for being there as a moral support to me and other colleagues as well who would peep in to help. Without the support of all of you, it would not have been possible to run the show in such an effective manner. Thank you once again for making this online conference a grand success. We look forward to listening to your inspirational words again in the future. Thank you so much.